Imagine it. The year is 1881. My dear Watson is introduced to Sherlock Holmes in London, and another Watson in Scotland is the very first black international football player. Construction begins on the Panama Canal. China and Russia sign a treaty, and then Tsar Alexander II of Russia is assassinated in St. Petersburg. Stateside, a 3,500-year-old Egyptian obelisk is erected in Central Park. And Alexander Graham Bell and Thomas Edison form a telephone company. Clara Barton creates the Red Cross, and what is now known as the Tuskegee University is open to have Booker T. Washington as its very first president. And finally, the 20th president is being inaugurated. Winning by only 10,000 points, James Garfield is a pro at winning elections, as he had been winning every single election he'd been in for nearly 2 decades. The fun fact is, he never even intended to be a nominee for president. He went to the Republican convention to nominate someone else, and somehow he ended up getting the nomination for the whole party. One of the first things he did as president was make someone mad. Senator Roscoe Conkling of New York was the head of New York Customs House. The president gave a list to the Senate of men he wanted to appoint, and a lot of these were Conkling's friends. But there was one name that went too far for Conkling, and that was William Robertson. He was the arch nemesis of Conkling, and it caused a lot of problems. Conkling basically protested several times, and Garfield took personal offense. He's actually quoted as saying, "This will settle the question whether the president is registering clerk of the Senate or the executive of the United States. Shall the principal port of entry be under the control of the administration or under the local control of a factional senator?" In other words, who is he reporting to? This one senator, or is he the president of the United States? Conkling and Garfield went back and forth on this for months. It was just like a pebble in Conkling's shoe. He couldn't get over it. So what did he do? He resigned. He and the other New York senator believed that they would get reelected and that they ultimately would win against the atrocities that Garfield was doing by picking people they didn't like. But what ended up happening actually is they didn't get reelected, and their move they thought was they were making failed. And ultimately, Garfield was the victorious one. Now, at this point, you may be thinking, why did I spend so much time talking about what seems to us now as a squabble, a political squabble? But I just didn't have a whole lot to work with, unfortunately, which, that's a lot more than I had to work with Harrison a few presidents back, who died after a month. I'd actually just love to tell you about the conference in '82 where Garfield invited all the Republicans to come and have a nice, good chat about progress and moving forward and everything else. It's just that it didn't happen. Unfortunately, in July of '81, there was an assassination attempt against Garfield. He was at a train station on vacation, taking his 2 sons to go speak at his alma mater. A man who was kind of a disgruntled attorney had a belief that he was going to be appointed, and he did not get an appointment. So he came to the decision that God wanted him to take out Garfield so that his vice president could become president. In fact, the gun he used to shoot the president was a nice one that he thought would look good in a museum one day. The United States looked at this assassination, ultimately successful assassination, as really a failure of the civil service. The Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act was passed in 1883 as a way to reform the whole civil service system. Surprisingly, Garfield did not succumb to his injury initially. He actually ended up recovering, and they sent him off to the sea basically to rest, and they thought he was going to make a triumphant recovery. But when he got back to the White House, he wasn't getting as better as everyone thought, and that's because the bullet was still lodged in his liver. Now, this is a man who was shot pretty much at point blank range at the train station in front of his kids. He almost didn't make it, but it was the bullet, not the shot, but the bullet that was lodged in his liver that ultimately took his life. James Garfield died in September. Join next time for when we find out what was so special about that vice president.